Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sociology Experience. In this video, I'd like to talk about politics. Politics is the social institution that distributes power, sets a society's goals, and makes decisions. It's truly all about power, and power is defined as the ability to achieve desired ends despite resistance from others. There are several major political systems, including monarchies, kings and queens based on family lineage, democracies based on choices of the governed, and dictatorships and oligarchies based on a single leader or groups of leaders with no tolerance for political pluralism. Let's take a look at political freedom in global perspective. And you can see that the countries represented in the orangish-brown color are countries that do not have very much political freedom, whereas the countries that are listed in the blue color have partial or complete freedom. Now, I will be basing most of my discussion in this video on US politics. And the first thing that I'd like to mention is that the US is supposedly a democracy, a representative form of democracy, which basically means that we go out and vote for people that represent us. Now, I am not 100% convinced today that we no longer have a democracy. I, along with others, such as C. Wright Mills, believe that we have perhaps what's called a plutonomy. And a plutonomy is a small group of extremely well-to-do rich people who control everything, including the educational system, the media, the economy, and government and politics. Let's take a few minutes and do a quick review of US federal government. The founding fathers of the US set a system of checks and balances. And basically, checks and balances is all about the ability of one branch of government to check on the other branches of government to distribute power. The founding fathers were very concerned and did not want to see one person or a small group of people basically having ultimate power, trying to eliminate something like a monarchy that they had come from. There are three major branches of US government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The executive branch is the president, the vice president, and the cabinet. There are three major criteria that someone must meet in order to be eligible to run for president of the United States. The person must be a natural-born US citizen. The person must be at least 35 years of age, and the person must be a resident of the US for at least 14 consecutive years. The president, with some exceptions, can serve 2 4-year terms. Let's talk about the legislative branch. The legislative branch is Congress. There are two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Let's talk about the Senate. There are a total of 100 senators, 2 for every US state. Senators serve 6-year terms. The House of Representatives has a total of 435 members. It is based on proportional representation, which means that the more people living in a state, the more representatives that state will get. Every state will get at least 1 representative. Representatives serve 2-year terms. The judicial branch is the court system, and the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. There are 9 Supreme Court justices that sit on the Supreme Court. Well, how do you become a Supreme Court justice? Well, the current sitting president, if there's a vacancy, will nominate someone. There will be hearings, and the US Senate will vote. With a simple majority vote, if the person is nominated, will become a Supreme Court justice for life. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the US political spectrum. And on the slide in front of you, you will see a continuum. On the left-hand side of the continuum, you will see the word liberal, and on the right-hand side, you see the word conservative. So politically, what does it mean to be liberal, and what does it mean to be conservative? If you are liberal, you are basically open to new behavior or opinions and willing to discard traditional values. Generally, if you are conservative, you are holding to traditional attitudes and values and cautious about change. Now, generally what we will find is that very few people will be conservative on every issue. Likewise, very few people will be liberal on every issue. Most people might hold some conservative and liberal views. We can break these into two major categories: economic issues and social issues. Economic issues deal with things like taxing. Social issues deal with things like same-sex marriage, abortion, and protecting the environment. And so in the US, we have two major political parties: the Democrats and the Republicans. In the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you can see that Democrats tend to lean left or tend to be liberal, whereas Republicans tend to lean right or tend to be conservative. That does not mean that you can't have a liberal Republican or even a conservative Democrat. If you look at the continuum, again, it is a continuum, so people can fit anywhere on this continuum. If we broke the continuum right down the middle and said that this is the center or someone who's centrist, again, people can be anywhere along this continuum. So there are other political parties in the US that don't get often mentioned and that are not shown down here in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, but you've probably heard of some of them, like the Green Party and the Libertarian Party. And I believe that one of the major reasons that we don't hear about these third party or independent parties much in the US is because the lack of money that they have. Money is a very big part of politics in the US, and if you don't have money, your voice will generally not be heard. Demographics tend to shape how people vote and how they look at social issues, how liberal or conservative they tend to be. And so let's look at a few of these. Age. When it comes to age, what we generally find is that younger people tend to be more liberal, while older people tend to be more conservative. When it comes to race, people of color tend to vote more liberal, while Caucasians tend to vote more conservatively. When it comes to sex, women tend to be more liberal, while men tend to be more conservative. And when it comes to socioeconomic status, we find that well-to-do people tend to be liberal on social issues, yet conservative on fiscal issues, while poor people are the opposite. They tend to be conservative on social issues, yet liberal on economic issues. Voting. Voting is a very big problem in the United States. We have generally low voter turnout. And there may be a number of reasons why we have low voter turnout, such as when we actually vote, how difficult sometimes it is for people to vote, and a variety of other reasons. But I can't stress to you enough the importance of voting. So what I highly encourage you to do, if you are not registered to vote, but you are eligible to vote, if you live in Florida, you can go to this website, registertovoteflorida.gov. And if you go to this website, it's very easy. Simply follow the directions, register. You're going to answer a few questions. Are you a US citizen? Yes. If you're a convicted felon, if you are not deemed to have any mental incapacitations, you continue, and you can register to vote online. Now, once you get registered to vote, I do ask something of you. Please go out and vote. It is so important in a democracy for people to have their voices heard. But please make sure that before you go out and vote, that you become knowledgeable and educated about the people and the issues that you will be voting on. Also, be very, very careful where you get your information about regarding the people and the issues that you will be voting on. Okay? Please make sure that where you get your sources, that the information that you are being provided is actually factual. And unfortunately today, that can be an extremely challenging thing to do, but not impossible if you are diligent. The last thing I'd like to talk about in this video is military spending. And you can see on the slide in front of you that in 2015, the total US federal budget was a little over $3.8 trillion. This slide shows you what's called discretionary spending. And discretionary spending is spending that is not mandatory. There are certain things that the government is required to fund, such as Social Security. However, there's a large percentage of the budget, over $1 trillion, that's discretionary. The government can choose what to spend money on. And so if you look at this, you see that almost $600 billion, or more than 50% of the entire discretionary budget in 2015 was spent on the US military. When we compare the US to other countries around the world in military spending, you can see that the next 7 countries, Germany, the UK, Russia, France, and India, Saudi Arabia, and China, do not collectively spend what we spend on the military. If you look at the other countries of the world, they also do not spend what we spend on our military. And there's another way of looking at how the rest of the world, including us, how much money is spent on the military. I'm going to let you decide if you think that is an appropriate amount of money for us to be spending on the military. All right, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you back again soon. Bye-bye.